I think I've formed a new, I'm forming a theory. Well, not I think I've formed. I'm actually forming a new theory as to what I think's going on with random crashes. And what I think the actual cause of all this is. Without dipping into the, it's an SS2 issue, it's an NG issue, without dipping into all of that. Okay, so let's start out with this. If you take a look over here, you can see there are a lot more crashes than what I had in my previous playthrough, with the only real addition being just Chapter 1. Remember, we're just talking SS2 Chapter 1. I have more random crashes now than what I had before, and they're happening quicker. You can see the amount of play time, amount of play sessions I had. This tells you the time before a crash, and these are the actual play sessions that I have. The ones that are marked in green, I've marked those as fixed. Those are where I'm doing a test for another mod author, and they don't really apply. You know, it's a mod he's working on, so there are going to be crashes. So I've excluded them from the actual metric. And you can see down here another version came out, which is what I was testing as well, along with SS2, because I wanted to test the two together. Which I believe, not those two mods, not SS2 and Equipped Settlers. So we're just talking as mods begin to play together. I think it compounds the issue. And the first thing I think that gets drawn out of the deck is, oh, it's a mod conflict. I don't think so, and I'm going to tell you why that is. Other than random NPCs that can be spawned, other than that, let me tell you why that is. So a lot of these errors are classic holstered weapons. You'll see that comes up quite a bit. Some of them are random. I had one down here that was the graphic card driver for some odd reason. So you would think, okay, there's a hooking issue. But if you look at the amount of times I've played the game, it doesn't occur that often. It's random. We have a random crash. In the game, so we're here in Sanctuary. As I was going over here to Red Rocket, there was a crash. I had a crash, but not immediately. It wasn't a crash about loading cells or anything like that. I haven't had one of those yet. When I load a cell in a settlement, I do get and only in a settlement do I get a classic holstered weapons crash. So if I load anywhere else, so far, when I load anywhere else in the Commonwealth, if I was to actually fast travel to any other location in the Commonwealth here, other than a settlement, I won't get a crash. Or at least I haven't yet. It always seems to happen when I'm approaching Sanctuary, or I'm loading into Sanctuary. I fast travel to Sanctuary. Okay, let me go ahead and get some night vision on here. Let's get some thermal, because I'm pretty sure, and we're gonna let me do this real quick, because just in case we get ghoul attacked. So in one of my previous kind of play escapades, there was a mob of Rust Devils. There was a mob of Rust Devils right there. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and take these Rust Devils on. So I go to shoot them. I'm over, and I go to shoot them. There's too many of them, so I run over here to Red Rocket. And there's a lot of Rust Devils, as you saw. So I'm over here in Red Rocket, run around the back. I'm just going to kind of walk through it because I don't really have a video of that. I'm going to run around the back, and I thought, okay, cool. They're still firing like crazy. And then I'm going to go up here. Now, the minute I go up here, you see how that pause happened? I got a crash. Right there, I got a crash. I didn't get a crash in the back of the building. I got a crash right there. So I'm like, okay, that's weird. So I reloaded it back up, and then I came back and did the same thing, and I got a crash. Right when you saw that pause, the game did something. It was loading something. Okay, that's where the crash happened. It happened a second time. So when I went in to look at the buff out logs, I actually went and thought, okay, let's take a look at the buff out logs, which were down here. Let's see, I think it's these two. I believe it's these two. Do you see where it says nav mesh? Okay, so now we got a nav mesh error. Okay, well, maybe there's something wrong with the nav mesh. The nav mesh didn't build. But when I had the second crash, let's bring that one up. It's, again, another nav mesh. But this time, it's a different reference. In one of the buff out logs, it had referenced, the deep clean and remodel actually showed up as something where it was, it showed up as a reference, a nav mesh. It showed up in the crash log. But in the second, in one of the buff out logs, deep clean and remodels plugin didn't show up there. In another one, it did. That's random. That's random. So it's not. There's not a problem with the deep clean and remodel. There's not a problem there. I've been into Red Rocket. I've come through here. I've actually come through Red Rocket many times, and I haven't had any crash. So, but I had a crash here twice. Now, when I've used transfer settlements, there were times when I would have a crash in Sanctuary, and I even had a crash here, and I had a crash in Starlight Drive-In, and it was always combat pathing. But it was during an assault. A lot of NPCs were coming in, and they were coming in right off the bat. Here they were coming in right as I ran over this way. Okay, it's random. And when you look at the crashes, they're random. When you look at classic holstered weapons, it's random. It doesn't happen every time. So it's not the data. It's not the data. Because if it was the data, it would be a consistent crash. I don't think it's the code. Because if it was the code, there would be a consistent crash. Now, there's no way I could say that code isn't bugged or data isn't bad. But because it's random, and if you look, so we know that it's happening randomly, and oftentimes it's not repeatable. So with the SS2 corruption message, it didn't give me the same error message on the same game save. All right, just want to. Whoa, that thing's going nuts. All right, let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and drop that out for now. We're going to close that. Let's see. Let's go ahead. Yeah, that's fine. All right, let's see if that kind of gets rid of that message for now. Okay. So, geez, it's still going, isn't it? So, it might even be in the tray. All right. So, anyways, back to what I'm saying. It's completely random. It's not the same data. I mean, it's the same data, random. So, if we take for a minute to rule out leveled lists, that weapons are spawned randomly, that, NPCs are spawned from a list, items such as, again, weapons and armor are spawned from a list. If we take that out of the mix just for the moment, which if we say, okay, a certain NPC in that leveled list could have bad data, when that is spawned, it crashes. Okay, I can understand that. But that would show up as that NPC's reference, I would assume, in the crash log. Instead, it's showing nav mesh crashes. All right. So back to transfer settlements. So before I started playing SS2, I was using transfer settlements, and I had noticed I had a crash in Sanctuary when there was an assault coming in, not an SS2 assault, just a raid. Just a raid was coming in, or when I believe it might have been Combat Stalkers, or it was MAME, maybe one of those. No, it was Pack Attack NPC where I enabled raids. So one of them was Vertibird raids. Crashed when and these are vertibirds, so obviously the vertibird is not pathing on the ground. It's the NPCs that are pathing around to get a shot at the vertibird. That That seemed to happen if I was in a particular location. Now, in the past, in the game, in the load order or the entire testing session I did prior to this one, let me bring that up, which is here. You could see that there was large gaps. Classic holstered weapons might pop up, but the randoms were far few and in between. Compared to now. Now they're popping up everywhere. Okay, so now we're analyzing occurrence data. So, you know, when a person looks at that, they say, okay, well, that's bugs in the mod. That's bugs in the data. Now, in some cases, that is true. But I also had nav mesh errors using transfer settlements. Transfer settlements and sim settlements are very similar in that they place objects in the game world. And once they're placed, meshes need to be rebuilt or recalculated. So I don't believe that meshes are stored in the game save. Well, let me rephrase it. I don't think nav meshes are stored in the game save. I think that some are built dynamically when the game is when the cells load. So maybe some is, but I believe that it's actually built dynamically. So there's a process where the nav mesh has to be built. Okay? So so let me put one more thing on the table here. So because SS2 is more script intensive, and you can see where in now more often when I go to save, there is quite a delay where it looks like the game freezes for many seconds, and we might be able to go over to here and actually look to see when that happens. If there is a freeze, I can actually save this log and take a look at it, because it actually shows when the game has become unresponsive for a given amount of time. And that usually happens with saves. So it's occurring more often now because the game now has heavier scripting. So you would think, wow, it's a scripting issue. You know, and then of course that would be the VM. I can see where that would apply, but here's what I think it is. I think this is a race condition. And what I mean is not that the mod author is trying to beat another mod to the punch. It's a condition where when mods are tested, they are tested with a minimum load order. So the conditions in which the mod appears to work is a very light load, incredibly light load. Whereas when people mod their game, the load on the game is higher. So now you have scripting delays while many things are processing before something else can get processed. Or now you run the risk of things processing out of order, which we're going to get to that in a minute. Because now you have more things going on at one time. And that is something that mod authors don't test. They test their application as a standalone application, or a standalone mod, but not how well it integrates or gels with other mods. So if you're looking for a conflict, you can look for conflict in file names. You can pick those out easy. You could probably even look for form ID conflicts. Record identifiers in plugins, you could pick those out pretty easy too. So if you're looking at a record identifier, you know it's a it's a weapon record. You can actually look for form IDs and say, okay, we're modifying this record. You can pick that out. But what you cannot programmatically pick out is the order in which things might fire at a given time in a multi-threaded or a virtual, quote, multi-threaded environment. Because that really depends on the load of the engine and when things actually fire off. So the only thing that I can theorize at this point, because the crashes are random, even with classic holstered weapons, when it crashes going into Sanctuary, when I have a crash, it'll pop up classic holstered weapons. I will literally just go right. I load wherever I'm at, and then I go right back to Sanctuary, straight to it, and it loads just fine. It's random because there is something going on in the background, which is, the race condition of classic holstered weapons is thinking that whatever it's using is okay. It's not testing for that. It's not doing a check. So for some reason, if Sim Settlements is running an update at that time, or scripts fire off at that time, then things might slow down for classic holstered weapons. The onload might not happen. Or maybe when the onload happens, like let's say in classic holstered weapons, you have an on-cell load. It loads the thing, it loads the objects in the cell, but they're not fully loaded because the onload didn't hit in another script, which might change the way the NPCs are for whatever reason. So you have a difference now in the data. It's a mitigation difference because it's giving you still have the event of on cell load or on load for the cell, but yet they're firing off at different times. So theoretically, they could get a list of the same type of data, such as NPC references, but they're going to be different. You would almost need to wait until the cell's completely loaded. There needs to be like loads, I don't know if there's an event saying load finished or load done, but even then, it depends on how Bethesda coded it, and that's where I think the nav mesh errors are coming into play. I think that the nav meshes are being dynamically built. So once the data is in there, they're actually being dynamically, let me go ahead and close this out. They're being dynamically built. And because of that, the nav meshes aren't fully, they're not done yet. Or there was a problem building that nav, that temporary, that dynamic nav mesh. Because you have to have a dynamic nav mesh. You've got the base nav mesh of the settlement or the area that you're in. But then you have to be able to put objects in the way and rearrange objects. In the case of a settlement, you want to be able to remove objects and fix that nav cut, or fix that object's, the cut that's put in that nav mesh. You need to fix that collision. You remove that collision, and then you're adding new collisions. So it's possible, what I'm thinking, because it is random, it is possible, at least the way that I look at it, analyzing the fact that it's more script intensive now. Save times actually hang. I get more hangs on save until it's done. It's actually done doing whatever the scripts need to do, so the VM can freeze to serialize the data. That has increased, and the error rate has increased, but they're random. They're actually random. So I believe that when mods are tested, just to kind of summarize, when they're tested only by themselves. And then mod authors will say, well, my mod works. Well, that's true. But in the dynamics of a modded game, things are not happening at the same intervals, because now you have a shared virtual environment. The virtual environment is now shared between different scripts. So you may have delays now between when the event 1 fires in your script and event 2 fires. Now you may have a big time difference between that. And not only that, it might be possible that because you have that time difference, the game engine is now slower in building dynamic nav meshes and building these temporary tables. So on load might mean, yes, the resources are loaded, but that doesn't mean that all the background processing has completed. So if things are accessed and done before that background process completes, then you might have a crash. Again, if it's just the mod by itself, and let's say it's a C++ or a C# code, it runs fast enough, and the data it literally belongs to that mod. But in a modded game, that data is shared. Now, that's not that you could call that a conflict, but technically that's not a hard conflict. That's a soft conflict. But it's more of a race condition where the mods stressing a mod wasn't fully tested. That's what you see when gamers put all these mods in their game. Now, we're not talking about hard conflicts. That is a stress test on a mod. That's when you see things start popping up. Hey, I did this, these are the problems I'm having. Again, you can see the problems that I'm reporting, and that's the whole point in not only playing the mod, but actually seeing how well it interacts. And what you do is you find the weakness in the system, whether the weakness is in the game engine or in how mods are developed in general. So I think it is good to test things by themselves, and that way you can say, yes, it does work. But in a living, quote, quote, environment where all of these things are working together, that is where you see the problems start to magnify. So a mod could work, but in an environment where there's a lot more things going on, you can have soft conflicts where the mod wasn't stress tested, in that way. That would explain how script lag can cause issues, because now mods that are running, the scripts are running slow, but now the C++ is firing, your C libraries, or even F4SE, they're running at warp speed, but yet the script is lagging behind. So it might make a function call, and now this needs to get done because now another event fired off, and then we need to address that, but we need the first thing to be completed. But it's not, because now we have this soft conflict race condition that the mod wasn't tested for. So this is the theory I have at this point, just analyzing how adding another mod has increased, a script heavy mod has now increased the occurrence of random crashes, and you can see there's a lot more of random crashes, and the fact that when you do have a crash, it's always something different. It's a nav mesh crash, but it's saying at one time it was Valence's DNCR, another time it was something else. Yet 20 other times when I go to that location, I don't have that. But it happens because an assault was coming in as I ran into Red Rocket. So being into Red Rocket, it must have been trying to dynamically do something. It wasn't complete. It needed pathing, and down she went. So that particular crash, that nav mesh crash, that would be a Bethesda game engine crash, because they are not, to me, if that's what that is not having sanity checking in. So if I can't path to it, instead of giving me a null error, just leave the NPC there. Just say, okay, I'm going to calculate this, can't get there. So in a sense, when a while back, and I know this, but in a while back when I was a programmer, like this is a while back, I was at that time I was a programmer, and there was a systems analyst who was in the same department. And I'm like, this was actually a production environment, so it had nothing to do with games. And I'm like, why do you crash the program like that? Why don't you edit that out? He goes, well, that's a check. I'm like, what do you mean that's a check? He goes, well, that's a check. That tells us there's an error. Well, yeah, I mean, but couldn't you literally say, there's an error, put that in a log? And then when the program exits, literally put a message saying so many errors were logged, and then go back to the log to figure out what it is? Because these were mainframes back then. So, or a mini mainframe if you look at it that way. But they were not necessarily run on PCs. And I've never heard that before. And I'm like, well, why would you bring an application to its knees? Well, if you think about it, then for a game company to do that, it's kind of like saying, well, I'm going to bring this thing to its knees. That tells you got a problem. Okay, I see your logic. And yes, it makes sense. You're going to force them to fix the problem. You're going to force the user to fix the issue, to isolate and fix the issue. But what if the issue is it's the game engine? It is when the game engine is stressed, things are done out of sequence. That is when you need, or not out of sequence, but now the gap between the events have increased, and that actually introduces potential problems. Okay, so I'm going to end this video. I know this is a long one, but I kind of wanted to get the full explanation out there of what how I'm looking at this. And again, this is just a theory based on analyzing the results. And yeah, so I'm going to keep testing this out and, kind of keep seeing what it does. And I'll post back as I find things. So I would kind of take it with a grain of salt and just kind of say that, mods aren't fully stress tested. So, and like I say, I believe these are soft conflicts. So, yeah. All right. So everybody have a good evening. I don't know if I'm going to be on too much today. Today is, the weekend is kind of like, where I kind of take some free time to go do some stuff, but I still like to pop in every now and then and see what everybody's doing and see if anybody needs help. But, yeah, everybody have a great weekend, and I hope, yeah, you have a great week coming up.